am so excited to have Elizabeth Stuart Whitehead and Jennifer Klein here this evening. Elizabeth Stuart Whitehead is currently the visual arts supervisor for Prince George's County Public Schools, and Jennifer Klein is a certified reading specialist. And together with their experience, they have co-authored 2 books. The first is Using Art to Teach Reading Comprehension Strategies, and the second is Using Art to Teach Writing Traits. And I was so fortunate to spend time on the NAEA board with Lisa Stewart, who is still actively involved in NAEA. So thank you again, both of you, for being here this evening and sharing all of your expertise and knowledge. Take it away.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm going to share screen. All right, so the title of this session tonight is called Arts Integration, Using Art to Teach Writing, Teaching Flow and Sentence Fluency. We're going to talk a little bit about our 2 books that we have written and our background. So these are the 2 covers of our books. So if you're looking for them on Amazon, this is what they look like. You can also get them in the NAEA bookstore online and live in their bookstore if you're going there next week. So the focus of our presentation is that we will be sharing ways. Sorry, all of our heads are in the way of my reading of our own slides. Okay, there we go. I moved it. We'll be sharing ways to use art to develop literacy. So you are going to need something to draw on and some colored pencils or any other art making materials. So hopefully you have those nearby or can grab them quickly because this is a hands-on workshop. So there will be a section where we will ask you to apply these strategies and create a little work of art. That we hope that even tomorrow, as you go back into the classroom, you could actually use these strategies right away, and you can use your artwork as an exemplar for your students. So Jenny and I are going to share a little bit about ourselves and our background and how we got connected, because as you heard, Jenny was a reading specialist and I was an elementary art teacher. And so we taught at the same school, Tacoma Park Elementary, which was a pre-kindergarten through 2nd grade school in Montgomery County, Maryland. We're both in Maryland. So we're also at a little bit of a time difference. So if we say the wrong time of day, it's because we're on East Coast. We taught at Tacoma Park Elementary School. She was the reading specialist. I was the art teacher. And I had a little bit of extra time in my schedule. I know what? Nobody has extra time in their schedule, but this was many years ago and I did. And so our principal asked that I use the extra time slots to rotate all the 1st graders and the 2nd graders through this additional art class. And what we decided to do was we had a school-wide focus on reading comprehension at the time. And so Jenny and I co-wrote some lessons to teach with the 1st and the 2nd grade students on reading comprehension and art. And so we were able to kind of meld those 2 together at Tacoma Park. And then both of us moved to different schools. So I moved then to Cloverly Elementary and Jenny moved to Sherwood Elementary, and our journey continued. Do you want to share that, Jenny?
Sure. Yeah, and it's been a great journey. So we didn't plan this, but our schools were very close together. So we were able to go to each other's classes. I was able to go and observe and work with Lisa in her school, which was great. And at Sherwood, I had a fantastic principal who really supported the arts. and he was open to Lisa and I doing an after school program on reading comprehension in the summer there. So that was really great. So another thing I want to say about Lisa's school is she had a pond in her courtyard. So we were able to take the kids outside, and one of our activities from our reading comprehension book was done at her school. So that was really exciting. And then we both moved on and we're still working together. So it's been a great journey.
Yeah, so Jenny and I, we started presenting at state and national conferences. So the state conference and the NAEA conference. And we got such enthusiasm for some of the content that we were presenting that linked art and reading and writing, that somebody said in one of our sessions, you all really need to write a book. And we're like, yeah, sure, right. And we don't have time for that. But eventually we heard it enough and we were like, okay, we're gonna write a book. And so it took a few years, but we worked really hard and we were able to put out our first book in 2012. And then we started, then we're like, okay, well, if we're doing reading comprehension strategies, we need to do writing traits too. And so then we wrote a second book, and that came out. Do you remember what year, Jenny?
I think 2018.
Yeah, 2018, the writing book came out. And so we've got these two great resources, and hopefully you find them useful. So this is the first book. Each chapter is a different reading comprehension strategy. So there are 6 chapters in it. And it gives you direct lesson plans for ways that you can utilize these strategies, teaching them through art. So we start with art first to teach the strategy, and then we gradually release into reading and writing, using reading and writing, so that the students then are comfortable with the strategy in art and then transfer that skill over to reading or writing. Sorry, I gotta move the, so what we found is that when we link visual arts, this is kind of what I said before, linking visual art with the written arts, we found a connection between the messages, ideas, and communication and expression between visual art and the written arts. Okay, so this is our writing traits book, and we're going to focus on a writing trait this evening of sentence fluency. So we're going to teach you what that is, and then we're going to teach you what that looks like in art, to be fluent in art, and what flow and fluency looks like. And then we're going to teach you what that looks like in writing. So again, the writing book is also centered around the 6+1 traits of writing. And these are the different chapters. But tonight we're going to focus on sentence fluency.
So the sentence fluency trait. This is what we're going to do tonight, and this is what we ask students to do in the classroom. We're going to increase our understanding of the sentence fluency trait through a model lesson, which we really hope you'll enjoy. We're going to identify works of art that demonstrate flow or interrupt flow. We're going to create a work of art that demonstrates movement. We're going to also talk about the different techniques that writers and poets use to develop sentence fluency in their pieces. So again, we're as Lisa said, we're looking at how the artist creates flow and then how the writer creates flow. So what is the sentence fluency trait? The key features are how the piece sounds when read aloud. What is the rhythm and the flow of the piece? How the sentences are built and how they flow together. You know, do we have short sentences? Do we have long sentences? How do they flow together? And how can the flow be disrupted? At times we want the flow to be disrupted in art and also in writing. And what does the author do to keep the piece moving? And the whole idea behind the sentence fluency trait, or one big idea I should say, is it really engages the reader, because you want to pull your reader in. with the way that your piece sounds, with the way that your work looks. So when we kind of break down the sentence fluency trait and we think about what are the challenge areas for students, this is what we see. And if you work with any student that might have difficulty with writing, you probably see this too. First of all, sentence beginnings. So how are they starting their sentences? Our younger writers tend to start their sentences all the same. Are they varying the length of their sentences? A lot of students, well, especially developing students, they write really long sentences, and then you'll see them writing really short sentences. And so we want to help them know that the length of their sentences can really have an effect on the reader. And then what vocabulary are they using? And how word choice can really make a difference in creating that flow in a written piece. And that brings us kind of to the second bullet, which is also all the different writing techniques that students need to use to develop writing. For instance, onomatopoeia, the use of white space on a page. Is the writing spread out? Is it close together? Is it making kind of a diagonal on the page? And then repetition. And then the last one is developing sentences that have that rhythm and have that flow. So those are the challenge areas we see many people talk about as far as the sentence fluency trait goes. And this is why we want to help students develop that trait. So then why art? Lisa talked about some of the important reasons why we'll use art, but why art with the sentence fluency trait is because, first of all, we want to have artwork show students how artists use flow and then move that into how writers move flow before, looking at it with art, before they look at it with writing. And the second reason is that art can have flow. If we look at the piece, we can see how artists use the elements of art to create that flow in a piece of artwork. And then actually the last one is one of the really important things about art, and that is that it's so visual. And all students can say something about a piece of art. So that's how the art relates to the sentence fluency trait.
Okay.
So, yeah, do you want to move on, Lisa?
Yeah. So this slide, it's a lot of language, but this is directly taken from our book in the sentence fluency chapter. And what we wanted you to see about this was that we lay out each chapter of the book, like I said before, as lesson plans. So we have a mastery objective, we list the National Visual Arts Standards, and we list the Common Core the National Common Core Standards for English language arts. So it lists those things in the book, so you don't have to go find out what those are. The other day, someone on the NAEA Collaborate site actually posted a question specifically about writing. They were being asked to infuse writing into their curriculum and making sure that the students they're showing how they're supporting the writing goal at their school. And so this is really great because it pulls out those ELA standards so that you can go to your administration and say, okay, this lesson that I'm doing, this is the actual standard that I'm teaching out of the ELA curriculum. And in Maryland, I don't know about your state, but in Maryland, we actually tell all of our teachers that they are teachers of reading and writing, that we all teach literacy in our content. And so that it's really important that we're supporting these standards. I actually adjunct for Micah on Tuesday nights, and I teach a course called Developing Critical Literacies. And I actually teach the art students at Micah how to read. We review every single Common Core standard And I show them how it all relates to art. So if you look at these standards, you teach these things. You don't realize you're teaching them, but you teach these standards. And so understanding and knowing them and being able to communicate that to your administration is like, then like light bulbs go off with them. They're like, oh, wow, you're actually teaching the reading and writing standards in your art classroom. And a lot of art teachers don't know that they're actually doing it. So I teach the teachers how to link the art standard with the reading language arts standard. So we're going to do a warm up. So what we'd like you to do in your paper, sketchbook, whatever you have, is to define or describe what to you the word flow means, what kinds of things flow, what makes them flow, what kinds of things flow quickly versus flowing slowly, and how can we see flow in an artwork. You can write these things down. You can also share them in the chat if you'd like to, you can say what flows quickly and then you can list a few things, or what flows slowly, you can list a few things. So however you'd like to engage. You can also unmute and share too, if you'd like. So we'll give you a few minutes to kind of write that down or think about your thoughts about the answers. All right, so feel free to put any responses in the chat, or you can use the raise hand function, or you can just unmute as well. I see Jenna wrote, things that flow quickly is dancing. Some dances, right? Some dances also flow very slowly too. So it kind of depends which dance. Water. And then quick and slow can be thoughts, absolutely. At night, my thoughts flow slower than they do at 8 a.m. In art, flow of color and pattern and emotion. Michael Bell, hi Michael. You're hanging out from Maryland. Michael's from Maryland. Michael says energy, ocean, motion, light, quick and slow, the tides. Great. Theone says flow is unique movement in a picture plane, water, rolling objects, plants, swirling lines. Anyone else? Sometimes we get students that say honey, molasses flows slowly.
We had adults talk about traffic once.
Oh, yes.
I can identify with that.
Yeah, traffic. Any other ideas? Okay, that was good. So this is our definition of flow. It means to move along or out steadily and continuously in a current or stream. And on the next few slides, we're going to take a look at some artwork that shows flow. So we're going to do a little compare and contrast. So in your notebook, sketchbook, or in the chat, what are the differences in the movement that the artist is trying to show in each of these pieces? So you have these two pieces. Take a look at their movement, their flow, their energy. What are some of the differences that you see? Jenna says swift and sedentary. I like that. Leonie says quick and meandering. Michael says thin and whimsical versus round and heavy. Yeah, so I tried to pick two pieces that one clearly showed the movement, like, literally in this monumental sculpture by Klaus Oldenburg, you're seeing like you're able to kind of follow the movement in the hose as it winds around. And then one of his monumental foods of this, like, I like the word sedentary, meandering, round, and heavy, right? Those are all really good words used to like kind of describe this, big thing that's just kind of sitting there. So great. All right. So do the same with these two pieces. Where do you see movement and flow in the Vasily and the Umara Shoen pieces? What are the colors and the lines that you see? You're just kind of analyzing those two pieces. Jenna, which one are you talking about for intense and muted? Or what parts of the artwork?
Vasily, she said.
So what does Vasily do in his work that helps to show flow? And movement.
Lines and patterns coming out of that center circle, that centralized circle, gives it that chaotic, energetic, intense, I think is what Jenna was trying to get at, feeling.
Yeah, so he kind of layers these lines over and over, and then in some cases he layers them more than in others, right? So it's like kind of darker in that bottom left and lighter up in the top right. And how about his use of color? What does he do? Is it many colors? Mhm.
Shades of blue, yeah.
Different shades of blue.
A
Okay.
monochromatic value scale.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So this artist, right, yeah, monochromatic. This artist really kind of focuses in on one color. If you take a look at some of his other pieces, predominantly all one color, that's kind of built up in places to show depth and a lot of movement in his work. See, and he says swirling monochromatic and radiating lines versus repetitive and geometric lines that connect. Okay. And how about the piece on the right? What did that artist do to show flow? Did something different than the other artist did? Jenna says natural elements of the body and nature to show movement. Danny says line work looks like a web and curves of a garment, and those are repetitive. So Michael, say more about how they could be the same conversation. So you feel like her garment relates to the piece on the left? They can relate in pattern and also in context. Okay, great. White dress is flowing. Yeah. So when I looked at the piece on the right, definitely there's this whole like S kind of movement to the piece, right? And I feel that's similar to on the left, right? There's also that kind of like S, but then there's more of a swirl. So I see the connection between the two. And for me, it's her hair, right? Like I kind of want to like go touch all the hair. Like it's really looks so soft and like flowing, and how long it is, like almost all the way down to her feet. And that it kind of follows the curve of her body in that same S movement. So two very different, but that yet also some similarities in the way that these two artists use flow. So Michael says that the black of her hair flowing mimics the white in the painting on the left. Interesting. Yeah, very cool.
I wouldn't have noticed that if he didn't just mention that.
Yeah, it really does. That was an unintentional choice, but that's awesome. All right. So next, so we're walking you literally through what we would have the students do. Okay. So next, what we would have them do is to present their ideas to the class, which is one of the things that we all just did, and then ask them as an assessment. So we actually believe that this activity we would probably break them up into pairs so they could go back through these 2 pieces and work into pairs or small teams, groups of 3 or 4, to actually look at the color and the line that they see in each one of these. And we could have them annotate. I don't know if you're familiar with annotating text. It's something that you probably do if you're in a class and you're asked to read something. You would highlight things, you would circle things, you would write in the margins. Okay, that's called text annotation. Well, you can have students annotate artwork as well. I know they might get a little nervous wanting to like draw on a work of art, but if you have it printed in color, kind of color is important, I think, in these 2 pieces. But they can write on it. Sometimes I'll have them put the artwork in a plastic sleeve, and then they can use dry erase markers. So you can reuse the color copies over and over again. But students can annotate and write in the margins. They can add sticky notes to it, some of their thoughts, and then they would share that with in their group, and then they would have you could have a whole group conversation. And so as an exit ticket, you would ask each individual student to write down or share with a neighbor or something like that, however you administer exit tickets. What are some ways that artists create flow in their artwork? And hopefully you're going to get answers like, well, they use color, they use line, they use texture. So you might have them talk about some of those things that they saw that were similarities in ways artists show flow. Okay, so the next thing we would have students do is to now create a work of art that shows flow. And again, in this chapter, you'll see that there are master objectives, essential questions, the standards, materials, a warm-up, a pre-assessment, and guided work. That's the layout of each of our chapters. So what we'd like you to do is that you are going to use kind of this quick sketch method to design a few thumbnail sketches, 2 or 3, that show flow, okay? And then we're gonna give you some work time to actually then enlarge one of those into a larger piece. And we're hoping that you'll share some of what you have done with the group. So you're gonna get your art materials. First, just do a few sketches. So how would you illustrate the concept of flow? So create a few thumbnail sketches for that. I want to show you some examples. So we did this in my oldest child's 5th grade English class. And these are some students in progress illustrating flow. And the child all the way on the left is my oldest, who is now an 8th grader and has red hair. So does not even look like that anymore. But we wanted to kind of show you, you can look on the table of the student all the way to the right. You can see that we copied some of the artwork for the students so that they could be analyzing as they're looking at the pieces and analyzing where the artists show flow. So we gave them a small sheet of paper. It's not huge. I think it was like 6 by 9. We had the elements of art on their table so they could refer to those. So take a few minutes and create a few thumbnails. And give us a yes or a thumbs up in the chat when you're done. I'll give you some teacher examples for inspiration. We actually taught this workshop at, I want to make sure I use our acronym correctly, NIMWA. Did I say it correctly? Jenny, I don't know if that's how they pronounce it. It's National Museum of Women in the Arts, NIMWA. And we had a full day of reading and writing activities with them. And this was some of their interpretation of flow. We actually pulled out the watercolors and everything. So we're going to set a timer for, let's go with hour. We're kind of running low on time. Let's go with, what do you think, Jenny? I want to make sure we get through the next part.
Why don't we do 5 minutes?
Okay, we're going to set a timer for 5 minutes. So if you could take one of your thumbnails, hopefully you drew out a few sketches. If not, just the first sketch you drew. Spend some time kind of enlarging that to show your interpretation of flow in an artwork. It can be realistic, it can be not realistic.
And we'll check on them in like 4 minutes and see where
Okay.
they are.
Sounds good. All right, so minute left. Put on your finishing touches, or it's okay if you didn't finish, because you can finish this because you're all going to be teaching this tomorrow, hopefully. So you can use this as your exemplar. So a few more seconds. I would love it if anyone would like to share, even though it's not done, what you've done or what you've started on. Anyone willing to share theirs? Deannie wants to share. Saw you turn your camera on.
Hello, I'm in my daughter's room and she has a lot of different things here. She's got a 3D printer and it's behind a curtain and I see a lot of different things. So I'm going to show you this picture. It's pretty abstract. I've got the 3D printer. I'm looking at the wheel, how it turns and all the wires and the flatbed on there. And then she's got like a big orange plug for some kind of a sound music thing going on. And then there's another like object where it's kind of like an air purifier or something like that. And so I was looking at the color and the flow of everything and the movement. And that's how I started it.
I love that. Thank you for
So it's
sharing.
abstract.
That's great. I love it. I absolutely can see how you incorporated kind of the flow with the lines and the colors in there. Thank you. Would anyone else like to share? Jenna wants to share. Can you unmute? Yeah.
I'll share, but I don't really need to explain it. It's just a bunch of
Oh, that's awesome.
curves, and every time I made a shape, I colored it in.
Mhm.
That's it.
That's great. That looks very fun. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? All right, so that is how we kind of set up the concept of flow and sentence fluency in art. And now Jenny is actually going to walk us through what it looks like in writing. Oh, sorry. So as a closure, we would allow the students to have independent work time, and then sharing their final work of art with the class. And then something I just want to point out, usually I try and get you all to answer this, but what's really great about this is that all of you came up with different answers to what flow looks like. And so it creates works of art that are all vastly different, which I think is really cool. So that's something that I'm always striving to get my teachers to create more lessons that kind of create that variety in student work. Okay. Your turn, Jenny.
Okay, great. So like Lisa said, now we're going to look at how we can apply it for writing. And we're going to start with the mastery objectives, because just like the art lessons, the writing lessons are also set up in the same format, which makes the book, really easy to use. So the mastery objective is now that students have an idea of what flow is and see how artists use flow and understand, like, we pointed out that they use it by color, by line. Those were the things that we were looking at, two of the things. Now we're going to see what writers do. So what are the different techniques writers and poets use to develop that flow, which we're calling sentence fluency, in their pieces? And the think abouts are, how does listening to how authors develop their sentences help me to develop my own sentences that flow in my own writing? And it's just so important for kids, just like, we're looking at real artwork in art class. It's really important for kids in the writing class to really see the books that writers are writing and see what techniques they're using. And then the second bullet is, what are those techniques that writers and poets use to develop that rhythm and that flow in their writing? So we're going to do a couple exercises together. And so we're just going to kind of review some of the writing techniques that we teach. One is repetition. So we want kids to be listening for how the writers use repetition in their writing. Onomatopoeia, which you might remember, are words that make a sound like crash, bang, boom. What can that do to your writing? How can onomatopoeia make your writing come alive? How is rhyme used, and how does that affect the flow of your sentences? And alliteration is another technique, and that is when the same letter or sound is used. And there's an example: lovely lace, silver stars spread across the sky, and how that helps the reader, when they're reading it aloud, really the sentence flows with that use of alliteration. And how are line breaks used in poetry? How are line breaks used? And that kind of goes also with the white space. Where are you breaking your lines up? How are you using that white space on a page? And then conventions. How does that help your reader? And I just want to say that one time a group of us we were gathered together to analyze a lot of students' writing, and one piece came across, and the student really didn't have a lot of capitalization or punctuation. Spelling was fine, but not capitalization and punctuation. And as a reader, we're so used to seeing all that capitalization and punctuation that we can just flow through the piece. But because that student didn't develop that, the piece was really hard to read. And I think when kids understand that, teachers aren't just trying to get children to use conventions in the writing, but that conventions really serve a purpose, and the purpose is so that that as a reader you can flow through the piece. I think they'll have a deeper understanding of that technique. And so now for the fun part. So Lisa already introduced her daughter in an earlier slide. This is a poem that her daughter wrote, and I love it because it's a poem for two voices. And some of you might know the book Joyful Noise, which is all poems for two voices, and the voices make a lot of insect sounds. So that's a great book. But this is one that Caitlin did. And so reader 1 reads what's written on the left side, and reader 2 reads what's written on the right side. And so Lisa and I are going to actually read this to you. And we'd like you to think about what techniques Caitlin used, and how the techniques help to keep the piece moving. We've written them over on the right side. You might see them posted right there. And then underneath are just the writing techniques we just went over for you to use to see which ones did she use. And so we're going to ask, after we read the poem and you have a chance then to look at it again, to see what techniques did she use. And we're going to ask you to either raise your hand or unmute and talk to us. We'd love to see you and hear you, or put your answers in the chat. And maybe Lisa, I guess you could go ahead and read the chat for us, or Jessica. But now here's the poem, and it's called Dust Bunnies. And Lisa, why don't you read the left and I'll read the right.
Okay. We live under the thing
that you watch
too much
TV on.
It's hard to do on Zoom to read the same line at the same time. Then we go hoppy hoppy
to the amusement park
upstairs. Then we jump on it for hours.
Your nice fluffy bed.
When you come,
we don't care.
We are unfindable.
We are fuzzy and free.
We are dust.
So go ahead and look over that poem, and then let us know what writing techniques you saw Caitlin using to help make that poem flow.
I saw the white space just visually. It almost looks like stairs, how it was written on there, and then the line breaks. It's like there's a few words and not a lot, and that kind of continues the flow, whether it's fast or slow.
Mhm.
Great. Thank you so much. Other techniques that people saw or heard?
Also, I see alliteration, fuzzy and free. The use we, when,
Mhm.
then, that.
Mhm.
Great, thank you. Yeah, definitely the alliteration and the repetition of the words. And when you hear that read aloud, it really makes an impact on the reader. Thank you for your participation. Any other ideas? I think we kind of covered that, so we'll go on to our next one. So this next one is by Emily Dickinson. This is her poem 99, and we'd like you to do the same thing. So I'm going to read it to you and then think about what techniques Emily used here. New feet within my garden go, new fingers stir the sod. A troubadour upon the elm betrays the solitude. New children play upon the green, new weary sleep below, and still the pensive spring returns, and still the punctual snow. So what techniques did you see Emily using here?
It looks like she used onomatopoeia, um, the sound, the actual sound, and also just the rhythm of it, the flow of the rhythm, the line breaks. It's just the repetition.
Yeah, and she wrote a lot in meter, and meter poems really have that flow. I mean, that's what's so nice about that, writing in meter. Um, yeah, and someone else said repetition too.
Mhm.
Great. Any other ideas? Okay, wonderful. So we just wanted you to have a chance to look at some writing and see how we teach the different writing techniques to students and what we do. So those were our poetry lessons, but we have some other ones in the chapter. One, we have them draw their characters first and then write their captions with that, which gives them a chance to go ahead and use art to do their character drawings. And then since they're in little squares, there's actually a template in the book. They can write their captions right over that. Um, and then also the use of picture prompts, more artwork or illustrations for students to write about and then share with others. And then also the sentence fluency techniques, letting them use the sentence fluency techniques in their own writing. Um, and then this last slide is just other art and literacy lesson ideas. Actually, they're combined from both books. We have a photography story, and the photography story is from, let's see, the photography story is from chapter 1 from the ideas trait, which is the reading book. And students actually look at art first and see what story the art's telling. And then we give them cameras to go around the school to find a story for them to tell. And they take photographs, like 3 or 4 photographs, and then they come back and put that together to tell their own story. So they're using the art to in the photographs to tell their story, and using that as opposed to just writing it down. So that works really well. Most all the lessons can move into a center activity. So the chapters have center activities. There's a lesson on focal point. And again, that is in the reading book, determining what the focal point is and then creating pieces with focal points. The synthesis quilt is also in the reading book. And that's where they synthesize the big ideas of the story and draw a picture to communicate that idea. And then we put all the pieces of their artwork together to make a synthesis quilt. And other ideas we give are to invite artists and authors and writers and poets in to discuss how they generate their own ideas, or how any of these traits or strategies apply to them. And then we also have checklists for students to check their own work for conventions, for themselves to work with a peer, and for a teacher to work with them as well. And if you would like more information on the reading strategies, here are 2 books that we've used. They're just 2 different editions of the same book, which are strategies that work. You can also go to the Education Northwest website to learn more about the 6+1 traits of writing. And yeah, those are two resources that you might find helpful. And here again are 2 books that Lisa reviewed at the very beginning, which you can find on Amazon, or as Lisa said, if you go to the NAEA bookstore, hopefully they'll be there at the conference. And we've also written magazines in school. We've also written articles in School Arts Magazine. There's one on reading and the one on the left, and one on writing on the one on the right.
And I believe those were emailed ahead of time as well, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Great.
So we just want to thank you so much. We're here for a few minutes. If you have any questions for us, this is how you can contact us. If you think of questions later, please feel free to write down our email addresses and let us know what questions you have, or if you are asked by your supervisors to infuse reading and writing, we highly recommend you check out our resources and let us know how it works. We'd love to hear from people. You know, I tried this lesson and here's how it went, and send us images. We want to see all of that. So thank you very much for your time.